Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Fluctus Channel. The AC-130 gunship was built for one terrifying purpose: to circle above a target and keep firing until the target stops fighting back. Unlike a fast jet that strikes and leaves, the gunship stays overhead, watches, tracks, adjusts, and attacks again. That is why it became one of the most feared aircraft in American air power. The AC-130J Ghost Rider is a heavily modified AC-130J with a two-pilot digital flight station, advanced sensors, fire control equipment, precision-guided munitions, and trainable side-firing weapons. It is nearly 98 feet long, spans 132 feet 7 inches, and can fly about 3,000 miles before crew limits, rather than fuel alone, begin to matter. In combat, that endurance turns the aircraft into a persistent hunter, rather than a one-pass attacker. The gunship's reputation was built over decades. Earlier AC-130 variants became famous for carrying combinations of 25mm, 40mm, and 105mm weapons, delivering a level of sustained airborne fire unlike almost anything else in the American inventory. The current Ghost Rider keeps the side-firing tradition alive with 30mm and 105mm weapons, while also carrying guided options such as GBU, 3-9 small-diameter bombs, AGM-176 Griffin missiles, AGM-114 Hellfires, and the GBU 6-9 small glide munition. That mix matters because it gives the crew an escalation ladder. They can hit with cannon fire, step up to the big howitzer, or use guided weapons when precision matters more than volume. One AFSOC fact sheet even notes that the aircraft can employ the 30mm and 105mm at the same time against geographically separated targets. That kind of power only works if the aircraft is prepared carefully. The process begins on the ground with weapons loading. Ammunition is brought in, checked, and fed into the aircraft with methodical discipline because the gunship is not carrying one simple cannon. It is carrying a whole battery in the sky. Guided munitions are loaded separately. Crew members then move into digital pre-flight checks, powering systems, verifying sensors, and confirming that the aircraft's navigation, communications, and mission management functions are all talking to one another. In a gunship, pre-flight is not just about engines and hydraulics. It is about making sure the airplane, the weapons, and the eyes of the aircraft are fused into one firing platform. Then comes engine start and takeoff. The aircraft rolls heavy, lifts away, and settles into the long transit toward the target area. Inside the cockpit and battle station, the workload rises immediately. Pilots manage the airplane. Mission crew members work the sensors. The fire control side starts tying aiming, navigation, communications, and electronic systems together. This is where the AC-130 becomes something unusual. Part aircraft, part orbiting gun battery, part flying command post. The aircraft does not attack by simply pointing its nose at a target and diving. It fights by turning in a controlled circle, keeping the target at the right angle off the side of the aircraft, while crews refine the solution and sequence the shot. That process is exactly what makes maritime strikes by the gunship so dramatic. During a rim pack sinking exercise, The AC-130 joined the destruction of a large decommissioned ship at sea, proving that an aircraft, once associated mainly with land targets, could also deliver precise, punishing fire against a vessel in open water. Once the target is identified, the crew coordinates aiming through sensors and fire control systems, refines the orbit, and times each burst to the right point in the circle. Then the weapons speak. The 30mm hammers in tight bursts. The larger gun follows with deeper, slower violence. Every pass adds more damage. Every orbit tightens the pressure. This is not random strafing. It is carefully managed, repeated destruction from a stable circle in the sky. By the time the ship begins to die, the real story is already clear. The AC-130 greatest weapon is not just the guns. It is the crew's ability to combine navigation, sensors, discipline, and firepower into a single terrifying process. In Vietnam, the AC-130 crews destroyed more than 10,000 trucks, a legacy that still hangs over every modern gunship mission and explains why the aircraft inspires such respect wherever its orbit appears overhead tonight. The A-10 Warthog is a different kind of terror in the air. Where the AC-130 circles and crushes from above, the A-10 dives in lower, closer, and faster, built around one of the most famous guns in aviation history. The A-10C's GAU-8. A-Avenger is a 7-barrel 30mm Gatling gun capable of firing 3,900 rounds per minute. And the airplane was designed around it. The gun is so central to the aircraft that its firing barrel sits on the fuselage centerline, while the drum can hold up to 1,174 rounds. That combination turned the Warthog into an icon of close air support and anti-armor attack. The ammunition chain behind that weapon is part of the story. 30mm rounds have to be processed, inspected, and loaded correctly because the gun's effect depends on consistency as much as rate of fire. Armorers and munitions crews work through the loading process with mechanical precision, feeding the aircraft the ammunition it needs for repeated bursts. The A-10 can also carry up to 16,000 pounds of mixed ordnance on its pylons, including Mavericks, Sidewinders, bombs, rockets, countermeasures, and cluster munitions. That broad inventory is why the aircraft still feels like a flying arsenal instead of a single-purpose gun platform. Cluster bomb training adds another layer to that arsenal. During test and training work, the focus is not only on release, but on fuse function and how the weapon behaves after separation. The point is to understand not just whether the weapon falls, but whether it arms, opens, and disperses the way planners expect. That same philosophy shapes the broader weapons evaluation side of the A-10 world. OtterCam views from the 422nd Test and Evaluation Squadron make the aircraft's attack profile feel brutally clear. The Warthog lines up, commits, releases, fires, and pulls away while evaluators study the behavior of the weapons and the aircraft as one system. That is what links the A-10 to the AC-130 inches, the first section. They attack differently, but both are built around controlled violence. The AC-130 uses orbit, sensors, and repeated side-firing strikes. The A-10 uses the directness of the gun run, the punch of 30mm ammunition, and the flexibility of a wide weapons inventory, One lingers overhead like an executioner. The other charges in like a hammer. Together, they represent two of the most intimidating forms of American air-delivered firepower ever put into regular service. During strafing, the process is brutally physical. The pilot rolls in, steadies the nose, and brings the aircraft to face the target while the gun begins its violent spin-up. For a brief moment, the aircraft seems almost to drive the stream of shells into the ground. The recoil is immense, yet the airframe was built to absorb it. In practical terms, that means the A-10 is not just carrying a cannon. It is delivering a purpose-built gunnery platform that can also switch to missiles, bombs, or rockets, depending on what the target and the mission demand that day from crews in combat. But the Warthog's brutality in the air depends on an equally disciplined life on the ground. Inside the hangar, the A-10 looks less like a legend and more like a machine that must be repeatedly taken apart, checked, tested, and rebuilt section by section. That reality matters because the aircraft's reputation can make it seem indestructible. In truth, it stays lethal only because maintainers keep forcing it back into top condition between flights, inspections, and training cycles. Phase maintenance is one of the clearest examples of that hidden effort. Aircraft enter the phasing section so crews can perform inspections and repairs than a turnaround would ever allow. Panels come open. Systems are exposed. Components are examined, replaced, adjusted, and signed off. The process is time-consuming because it has to be. A 10S may look rugged from the outside, but age, vibration, recoil, weather, and hard use all leave marks that must be caught before they become mission-killing failures. The gun itself demands special attention. Installing the GAU-8, A is not like bolting on an ordinary weapon. It requires precise alignment, careful handling, and confidence that the aircraft and gun will operate together exactly as designed. Once installed, the gun has to be tested. Live 30mm fire tests verify that the system is functioning properly, while other test work supports the broader evaluation of the aircraft's weapons integration. The point is not merely to hear the gunfire. It is to prove that one of the most violent airborne weapons in U.S. service remains mechanically trustworthy. Avionics work is just as important. A head-up display installation is not glamorous compared with cannon fire, but it is central to how the pilot fights. The HUD places essential targeting and flight information directly in the pilot's view, connecting aircraft performance to weapon employment in seconds that matter. If the gun is the fist of the A-10, systems like the HUD are part of its eyesight. Then there is the engine side of the aircraft. In the engine back shop, specialists break down, repair, and prepare the turbofans that keep the Warthog flying. This is where wear, damage, and performance issues are addressed away from the flight line. Once ready, engines may be tested in a hush house, a controlled environment where they can be run hard and evaluated without the chaos of open ramp testing. That process matters because an engine problem discovered in a hush house is far preferable to one discovered in the air. So the story of the A-10 is not just that it fires weapons. It is that every burst depends on a hidden cycle of hangar work, phase maintenance, gun installation, avionics fitting, engine repair, and test procedures carried out by maintainers who treat the aircraft less like a legend and more like a demanding machine. The Warthog earns its reputation in combat, but it keeps that reputation because crews on the ground rebuild its confidence. One inspection, one fitting, and one engine test at a time before the next sortie begins again. That is the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of our new content. See you next time.